The dust of the Mojave settled on everything with a fine, gritty impartiality. It coated the hangars, the razor wire, and the woman who stepped off the transport bus, her worn duffel bag slung over a shoulder that seemed too slight to carry any real weight. Her name was Alara Vance, and she arrived without fanfare, a civilian ghost materializing at the gates of Marine Corps Air Ground Combat Center 29 Palms. The guards at the gate, two young lance corporals simmering in the heat, watched her approach. Their eyes, trained to assess threats, slid over her plain clothes, jeans, a simple gray t-shirt, worn boots, and lingered on her skin. A lattice of pale, silvery scars crisscrossed her forearms, a delicate, brutal map of some forgotten violence. Another, a thin white line, cut vertically through her left eyebrow, giving her a look of perpetual, placid focus. One of the corporals nudged the other. "Check it out. Think she got in a fight with a lawnmower?" he whispered, just loud enough for the wind to carry. The other snickered. "Nah, bad date with a cheese grater. They saw a woman, a civilian, and scars they filed under the category of mundane tragedy. A car crash, maybe. Nothing that mattered here." Alara's gaze swept over the sprawling base, taking in the heat shimmer rising from the tarmac and the distant, rhythmic thud of artillery practice. She heard their words, the casual cruelty of youth, but her expression remained unchanged. She was a still point in the swirling wind, her presence as quiet and unassuming as the desert tortoises that hunkered in the shade of the creosote bushes. She presented her papers, her movements economical. The guard's derision cooled slightly as he saw the official letterhead. The orders assigning her as a technical consultant. The term was vague, bureaucratic. In a world of rigid ranks and defined roles, it made her less than a person. It made her a problem. He handed back her ID with a shrug and waved her through, his duty done. She was someone else's problem now. As she walked toward the command building, the weight of 1,000 dismissive glances settled on her. A familiar cloak she had worn many times before. The Marines she passed saw only a fragile-looking woman with damaged skin, an anomaly in their world of hardened uniformity. They did not see the coiled strength in her posture or the unsettling calm in her eyes, the look of someone who had faced down storms far greater than a few childish taunts. Colonel Madsen's office was an oasis of climate-controlled order in the chaos of the base. Metals gleamed in glass cases, and a massive American flag stood sentinel in the corner. Madsen himself was carved from the same rigid material as his surroundings, square-jawed, with a discipline so ingrained it had ironed all the softness from his face. He looked at Alara Vance, seated opposite his imposing mahogany desk, and saw an administrative headache. He tapped a finger on her personnel file, a folder that was insultingly thin. "Miss Vance," he began, his voice a low rumble of authority that expected and always received deference. "Your file is light on details. It says you're here to consult on systems integration." He leaned forward, his gaze a deliberate instrument of intimidation. It slid to her scarred forearms, and a flicker of something, pity, condescension, crossed his face before being suppressed. "We run a very specific, very demanding operation here. What exactly is your expertise?" His tone implied she couldn't possibly possess any that was relevant. "Diagnostics," Alara replied. Her voice was low, even, devoid of any need to impress. And integration, the simplicity of her answer seemed to irritate him. He had expected a nervous, fumbling explanation, a justification for her presence. He received only facts. He sighed, a sound of profound executive weariness. This was a favor for some 3-star at the Pentagon, a bureaucratic stone in his shoe. Fine. He would find a place to put her where she couldn't interfere with real work. "Very well," he said, closing the file with a definitive thud. "We have a new drone reconnaissance program. Squadron VMX-1. They've been having some teething issues. You can observe their operations. See if your diagnostics can offer any insight." It was a dismissal. He was assigning her to the hangar of a troubled unit, a place for her to sit quietly and draw a paycheck until her assignment mercifully ended. He stood, A clear signal the meeting was over. Lieutenant Jesperson will show you to the hangar. Stay out of the way of my Marines, Miss Vance. They have a job to do. The unspoken addendum hung in the air. A job you know nothing about. Alara simply nodded, her placid expression offering no crack for his institutional arrogance to gain purchase. She stood and followed the lieutenant out, leaving Colonel Madsen alone in his sanctuary of order, confident he had successfully quarantined the disruption. He had put the ghost in a cage before it could even rattle any chains. The hangar assigned to VMX. One was a cavern of noise and restless energy. The metallic clang of tools echoed off the high ceilings, mixed with the whine of turbines and the shouted jargon of young men who believed they were masters of the universe. Alara was given a small desk in a corner, a forgotten island in a sea of controlled chaos. The drone pilots and maintenance crews, most of them barely out of their teens, gave her a wide berth. They saw her as Madsen did, a civilian, an outsider, a woman in a space they considered their own. They called her the consultant with a subtle, mocking emphasis, or sometimes, more cruelly, Scarface, in hushed tones when they thought she couldn't hear. She didn't react. She didn't try to correct them or insert herself into their conversations. She simply watched. Her days fell into a quiet rhythm. She would sit, observing the flow of work, her eyes tracking the complex dance of men and machines. She saw the minute inefficiencies, the tiny compounding errors born of overconfidence and a lack of deep understanding of the systems they operated. They treated the drones like disposable tools, while she looked at them as if they were complex organisms with their own histories and temperaments. Her attention was often drawn to a specific drone, an older RQ-21 Blackjack model that sat in a state of permanent disrepair in a far corner. It was cannibalized for parts, its fuselage scarred with the marks of rough landings and hasty repairs. The Marines called it the Ghost, a joke about its permanently grounded status. Alara would sometimes walk over to it, her fingers tracing the patched-over holes in its composite skin. She would rest her hand on its cold nose cone, her head bowed slightly, as if listening for a heartbeat that was no longer there. A young corporal named Diaz, quieter and more observant than his peers, noticed her strange ritual. He was a tech, frustrated by the squadron's recurring problems. One afternoon, he found the courage to approach her as she stood by the Ghost. "Anything interesting, ma'am?" he asked, his voice hesitant. Alara didn't startle. She turned her head slowly, her calm gaze meeting his. "History," she said softly. "Every machine has one. This one's is just written on the outside." Her words were simple, but they struck Diaz as unexpectedly profound. He glanced at the faded stenciling on the drone's tail, then back at her. His eyes caught on a tattoo on the inside of her wrist, partially obscured by a thick, puckered scar. It was a single, stylized raven's feather, inked in stark black. It seemed as out of place as she was a fragment of some other hidden story. The pressure began to build like a desert thunderstorm, the air growing thick and heavy with expectation. General Thorne, a man whose name was spoken with a mixture of fear and reverence at the Pentagon, was arriving for a 2-day inspection. The centerpiece of his visit was a massive, live-fire training exercise designed to showcase the new Smart Squadron concept, with VMX-1 and its advanced drone capabilities at its core. For Colonel Madsen, this was not just a drill. It was the hinge on which his next promotion would swing. Failure was not an option. The day of the exercise dawned clear and brutally hot. From a high-tech command and control center, Madsen and his staff watched the main display screens, their confidence radiating through the room. General Thorne stood behind them, a silent, imposing figure. The exercise began flawlessly. The first wave of MQ-9 Reapers launched, their video feeds painting a perfect, God's-eye view of the training range. Then it happened. The primary feed flickered. A line of garbled code scrolled across the screen. A second drone went dark. Then a third. Within 90 seconds, a cascading systems failure ripped through the network. The screens went black, one by one. replaced by a torrent of red error messages. "What's happening?" Madsen barked, his voice tight with rising panic. "Comms, give me a sit rep." "Sir, we've lost the primary command link," a young lieutenant stammered, his face pale. "The whole network is down. It's a software contagion, some kind of ghost code. We can't isolate it." The room, once humming with professional confidence, devolved into a frantic scramble. Technicians hammered at keyboards, their commands yielding nothing. Pilots shouted useless updates into dead headsets. The entire multi-million-dollar squadron was flying blind, a flock of deaf and dumb metal birds about to fall from the sky. Colonel Madsen's face was a mask of cold fury, his career evaporating before his eyes. And behind him, General Thorne watched, his expression unreadable, his silence more damning than any reprimand. In her forgotten corner of the hangar, Alara had been monitoring a secondary data stream on a ruggedized laptop. She saw the failure coming 12 seconds before it hit the main command center. She watched the chaos unfold on the monitors, her expression unchanged. She was not panicked. She was focused. As the chaos in the command center reached its crescendo, Alara Vance stood up. She walked from her quiet corner, her steps measured and unhurried, moving directly toward the main systems console at the heart of the room. The technicians and officers were too consumed by their own panic to notice her until she was right behind them. A young, fresh-faced lieutenant, whose name tag read Jesperson, turned and saw her. He put a hand out to stop her, his face a mixture of fear and irritation. "Ma'am, this is a restricted area," he snapped, his voice cracking under the strain. "You need to step away." Alara didn't look at him. Her eyes were fixed on the waterfall of red error codes cascading down the main screen. "I can fix it," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the din like a surgeon's scalpel, precise and absolutely certain. She didn't wait for permission. She reached past the stunned lieutenant and gently moved a junior technician aside. She sat down at the console, and the room seemed to fall silent around her. Her hands moved over the keyboard, and it was not typing, it was a performance. There were no wasted motions, no hesitation. Her fingers danced, a blur of controlled energy, her focus absolute. She wasn't running the standard fail diagnostics. She was diving deep into the system's core architecture, her commands pulling up lines of raw code that most of the techs had only read about in manuals. The flood of error messages on the screen slowed. The frantic blinking lights on the server racks began to stabilize. She found the malicious code, a sophisticated, polymorphic worm designed to mimic friendly diagnostic pulses, and with a few deft keystrokes, she didn't just delete it, she trapped it. She built a digital cage around it in a sandbox partition, rerouted the entire network's handshake protocol through a legacy backchannel, and purged the corrupted pathways. The entire process took less than 3 minutes. One by one, the drone feeds flickered back to life. The screen switched from red error messages to the serene, high-altitude view of the desert. The system was not just restored, it was stronger, inoculated against the very threat that had crippled it. Alara's hands fell still. She took a quiet breath. In the profound, ringing silence of the command center, she had single-handedly wrestled the ghost from the machine and won. The silence in the command center was absolute, thick with astonishment. Every eye was on the unassuming woman at the main console. Lieutenant Jesperson stared, his mouth slightly agape, the condescending authority completely drained from him. The cocky pilots and frantic techs looked at her not as an outsider, but as some kind of sorcerer. Over the comms, Colonel Madsen's voice, tight with anxiety, crackled to life. "Command, what is your status? What just happened?" The lieutenant, humbled, fumbled for his handset. "Sir, it's stable. The network is back online." There was a pause. "It was the consultant, sir. Miss Vance. She fixed it." The words hung in the air, an admission of failure and a testament to her shocking competence. On the other end of the line, Madsen was silent for a long moment, processing the impossible. From his vantage point in the observation tower, General Thorne had watched the entire episode. He leaned forward slightly, His gaze narrowed on the woman in the command center below. The perception of Alara Vance had been irrevocably altered. The whispers that followed her now were not of mockery, but of awe. Who was she? Where did a civilian consultant learn to dismantle a military-grade cyber attack with the ease of someone swatting a fly? Corporal Diaz, watching from the hangar bay's monitor feed, saw her get up from the console. His gaze was drawn again to the Raven's feather tattoo on her wrist. It wasn't just decoration. He was certain of it now. It was a key, a symbol of something they couldn't comprehend. He made a mental note to search for it again, but with a new set of keywords: special operations, ghost units, elite call signs. Alara herself seemed oblivious to the stares. Her work was done. She simply stood, gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod to the stunned lieutenant, and walked back to her quiet corner, leaving a room full of highly trained Marines grappling with the sudden, undeniable fact that she was more capable than all of them combined. She sat down at her desk and picked up a cold cup of coffee, as if nothing extraordinary had happened at all. The exercise resumed, but the simulated opposition, controlled by a red team of expert tacticians, adapted. They had failed to cripple the network, so they shifted their attack. A powerful, targeted electronic warfare assault flooded the airwaves, aiming to jam the command and control frequencies. It was a sophisticated, frequency-hopping algorithm that the squadron's standard countermeasures couldn't track. The drone links began to flicker and degrade again. This time, there was no panic. Every head in the command center turned instinctively toward Alara. Colonel Madsen's voice came over the comms again, but his tone was stripped of all its former arrogance. It was now the sound of a desperate commander seeking help from a proven asset. "Vance," he said, the name no longer an accusation but a plea. "What are we up against?" Alara didn't even look up from her laptop. "It's an old Wolfhound protocol," she said, her voice a calm statement of fact. "Aggressive frequency hopping, designed to sever command links in contested airspace." The name Wolfhound drew blank stares from the young Marines. It was archaic, a name from a previous war, a different generation of conflict. But in the observation tower, General Thorne stiffened. He knew the name. It was the call sign for a legendary Special Operations EW unit, officially long disbanded. How could a civilian consultant know that? "They're too fast for your digital filters," Alara continued. "But they have a weakness. They can't penetrate analog-hardened systems." She looked up, her gaze sweeping across the command center until it landed on Lieutenant Jesperson. "Bring the Ghost online," a wave of protests erupted. "Ma'am, that's the grounded drone," Jesperson said. "It hasn't flown in months. Its systems are a wreck. Its comms package is analog," Alara stated flatly, cutting through the objections. "It's shielded. It's the only thing that will punch through this noise. Power it up." Her authority was now absolute. They scrambled to comply. She guided a young, terrified pilot through the manual pre-flight, her voice a steady, calming presence in his ear. "Ignore the warnings on the main display. Watch your analog gauges. Feel the aircraft." She was talking to him like a seasoned flight instructor, teaching him to fly a machine she had never physically piloted but seemed to understand intimately. Under her guidance, the old, forgotten drone, the Ghost, roared to life. It rose into the sky, a relic among predators, and became their salvation. Its hardened analog signal cut through the EW static like a knife, acting as a secure relay node for the rest of the squadron. The network stabilized. Guided by a Ghost, they turned the tide of the simulated battle and won. The exercise concluded, a stunning success snatched from the jaws of catastrophic failure. The hum of the servers in the command center was now a sound of victory. General Thorne descended from the observation tower, his face a granite mask of contemplation. He walked past the saluting officers, his eyes scanning the room until they found the person he was looking for. He walked directly to Alara. Colonel Madsen hurried to his side, his posture ramrod straight, his face a study in newfound respect. "General Thorne," Madsen said formally, "this is the consultant I mentioned, Miss Alara Vance." General Thorne stopped in front of her. He was a tall man, and he looked down at her not with authority, but with an intense, searching curiosity. He started to extend a hand in a gesture of professional courtesy, but then he froze. His eyes had fallen on her forearms, on the intricate, silvery web of scars that told a story of violence far beyond a simple accident. His gaze then shifted, drawn by some unseen force to her wrist, to the single black raven's feather tattoo nestled among the damaged skin. The general's blood seemed to drain from his face. His hand, suspended in midair, was slowly, deliberately pulled back. The mask of command shattered, replaced by an expression of profound, heart-stopping shock and something else, reverence. "The ghost of a Najaf," he whispered, his voice so low it was almost lost in the hangar's quiet hum. He wasn't talking about the drone. He was looking at her. His eyes, sharp and intelligent, shot from the tattoo to her face, truly seeing her for the first time. The quiet strength, the unnerving calm, the scar through her eyebrow, it all clicked into place. "Vance," he breathed, the name a question and a confirmation. "Call sign Wraith?" The room, already quiet, went utterly still. The air became thick, heavy. The name Wraith was not from any official roster. It was a legend, a myth whispered in classified briefings and forward operating bases a decade ago. A solo operator from a tier, one unit so secret it was deniable, a ghost who could slip behind enemy lines and dismantle entire insurgent network from the inside out. A phantom credited with dozens of high-value missions before being listed as killed in action during a rescue operation that went sideways. The scars were not a story of misfortune. They were the last known report of a legend, written in flesh. In the ringing silence of the command center, General Thorne's posture shifted. He straightened his back, his shoulders squared, and all the weight of his 4 stars seemed to vanish, replaced by the simple, unadorned respect of one soldier for another. Slowly, with deliberate precision, he brought his hand up to his brow and rendered a sharp, perfect salute. It was not the perfunctory gesture of a superior officer. It was a tribute. He was not saluting a civilian consultant. He was saluting a warrior he, and the rest of the world, thought was long dead. The act was so profound, so unexpected, that it sent a shockwave through the room. Colonel Madsen, his face a kaleidoscope of dawning comprehension and deep, burning shame for his initial dismissal, immediately snapped to attention. His own salute was stiff, a silent apology for his blindness. One by one, compelled by a force greater than regulation, every Marine in the room turned to face Alara Vance. The cocky pilots, the humbled technicians, the stunned lieutenants, they all came to rigid attention. The only sounds were the soft rustle of uniforms, the sharp click of heels on concrete. There were no orders given. It was a spontaneous, unanimous chorus of respect, the highest honor they could bestow. They were saluting a ghost, a legend made real. Alara stood in the eye of this silent, reverent storm. She did not speak. She did not smile or offer any grand gesture. The stoic calm that had been her shield for so long remained unbroken. Her eyes, which had seen so much, met the general's. After a long moment, she gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. It was a quiet acknowledgement, a silent acceptance of their tribute. It was enough. The gesture said everything she would not. "I am here. I see you. Let's move on." The salute was held for a moment longer, a tableau of institutional reversal, before the general lowered his hand and the spell was broken. Alara's departure was as quiet as her arrival, but the atmosphere was fundamentally changed. General Thorne had personally intervened, his quiet words to Colonel Madsen ensuring that Alara's file was now classified at a level that would prevent any future administrative headaches. He saw to it that her next destination, whatever it was, would be reached without obstacle. She was waiting for her transport vehicle near the hangar, the same worn duffel bag at her feet. She stood beside the ghost, the old drone she had resurrected. Its battered fuselage seemed less like a sign of decay now and more like a badge of honor. Corporal Diaz approached her, his steps hesitant. He stopped a respectful distance away, his earlier curiosity replaced with a profound deference. He didn't ask about Najaf or the call sign Wraith. The questions felt intrusive, profane. Instead, he simply said, "Thank you, ma'am." For everything, Ilara turned from the drone to look at him. She saw not a cocky Marine, but a young man who had learned a crucial lesson about judging others. She reached out and lightly touched a patched-over panel on the drone's wing, a spot where shrapnel had once torn through it. "Take care of the old ones," she said, her voice soft but firm. "They have stories to tell." It was a piece of advice and a final, quiet mission for him. With that, she turned and walked toward the waiting vehicle. She climbed in without a backward glance, leaving the corporal standing in the vast mouth of the hangar. The final image was of Ilara inside the vehicle, the raven's feather tattoo on her wrist visible for a fleeting moment before the door closed and she was gone, a ghost fading back into the world. The great hangar door began to slide shut, the afternoon sun narrowing to a single, bright sliver, illuminating the dancing dust motes in the air. The silence that filled the space was no longer dismissive or empty. It was a heavy, thoughtful quiet, imbued with the weight of a legend who had walked among them, unrecognized. The steady, rhythmic hum of the newly robust and integrated systems was the only sound, a quiet testament to the silent strength that had passed through and transformed them all.